I'm Allison from Learning at the Primary Pond, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to take the science of reading and turn that into a daily schedule and weekly schedule that implements all the important components for kindergarten, first, and second grade. This is a super important topic that I've gotten so many requests for. It can be really challenging to take all this information about the science of reading and turn it into a practical schedule that works for little ones, allows you to differentiate, and actually fits into the amount of time that you have without you constantly feeling rushed and like you're just trying to squeeze everything in. So let's dig into this. But first, I also want to mention, if you're ready to dive more deeply into the science of reading and really learn about all the different pillars from oral language, phonics, phonological awareness, vocabulary, fluency, comprehension, even writing, I have a course that will help you learn so much more about the science of reading in a really understandable way that's not overwhelming. So look for the link in the caption for this video for that course. But make sure you watch the rest of this video because again, I'm going to make it so much easier and clearer to help you break the science of reading down and turn it into your schedule. So let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, so making a schedule can be really tricky, and it's even harder when you don't have the right ideas about what will help you make an effective schedule and what is really needed. So many teachers think that they need a couple of things to have an effective schedule, and one of those things is more time. A lot of teachers say, if I only had more time, then I can make a schedule that really works. Time can be helpful, but it's not all of it. Another thing that a lot of teachers say is, well, if I just had the right programs and materials, I could put them all together and this would all work. Having good programs and materials is important, but again, it's not the whole picture. So let's talk about what you actually need to make a really effective schedule that follows the science of reading. And the way I've kind of set this up is like a little house. So you'll see bit by bit that the house is being built. And we're going to start with the foundation. The foundation of the scheduling house is a clear understanding of all parts of the science of reading. Social media right now is giving a lot of attention to things like phonics and high frequency words, and those are important, but there's so much more. And we're going to talk about what more there is in a moment. Another thing that you actually need to build an effective schedule is to use something like my skills first scheduling method. I will explain what this is in a little bit here. And then the last piece that's really essential to having an effective schedule is that you look not just on a daily basis to make your schedule, but also on a weekly basis and very intentionally schedule for explicit instruction. And again, I will show you what this looks like in this video. Okay, so before I dive into what all of these pieces are and what they look like, I want us to take a second and look at what happens when you don't have some of these things in place, okay? And we're gonna start with the bottom, a clear understanding of all parts of the science of reading. When you don't have this, what you see happening is, number one, you struggle to make your school curriculum work. You're like, does this follow the science of reading? Is this okay? And if it doesn't, what on earth am I supposed to do? And you're just feeling like you have all this stuff, or maybe not enough stuff, and you can't quite put everything together the way you want it to be. Another thing that happens when you don't have that, firm science of reading knowledge is that your students unfortunately end up with gaps in areas like vocabulary. Again, things like vocabulary just aren't getting that much attention, but the science of reading is so much more than like phonics and high frequency words, and we want to make sure that we address all of it. And sometimes you don't even see these gaps, but then they go on to maybe a higher grade level, and they're not really equipped to maybe comprehend text as well as they could have been if you were building that solid foundation because you have that foundation and understanding of the science of reading. Okay, now let's talk about what happens when you don't schedule using the skills first method. So if that goes away, then you end up feeling like, oh my gosh, I can't fit it all in. I need more time. If you think back to our first slide. And then you can also end up trying to cram too much into your small group instruction. And it doesn't work. You're always, drawing arrows in your lesson plans. We didn't finish this. We'll do this tomorrow. You're feeling rushed as you're teaching small groups. And that is stemming from not scheduling using a skills first method. Last but not least, we have this little roof. If we don't have the roof, then everything kind of falls apart or flies out the house, because this is weekly scheduling for explicit instruction. And if you don't have this in place, then what can happen is that students appear to master a skill, but then they just can't do it a week or two later. And you're like, oh my gosh, I thought I taught them this. What happened? So as you can see, if we don't have one or two or even three of these components in place, then you're not going to be able to effectively make a schedule that really works for you and for your students. So now what we're going to do is we're going to break down each part of that house that I showed you one by one, and I'm going to talk about like what it means and all of that good stuff. So let's start with that foundation. If you remember, at the bottom of the house, I had listed clear understanding of the science of reading. This is a must-have. I actually have a course. It's linked in the caption for this video that you can take to really deeply understand these principles. So part of this clear understanding is knowing and addressing all important structured literacy components during your schedule. So when you're making your schedule, you want to make time for all of these pieces. And I'm going to show you what those pieces are in a second here. And then another thing that you want to think about, or rather another benefit of having this clear understanding of the science of reading, is that as teachers, sometimes we're thrown programs or curriculum, whatever you want to call it, and they may or may not be fully aligned to the science of reading, but maybe you're supposed to follow it or mostly follow it. Well, if you have that deep understanding, it's no longer this confusing, situation where you're trying to sort through these materials and figure out like, should I use them? Should I not use them? Do I need to adapt them? If you know, hey, this is what the science of reading says about, for example, comprehension instruction or vocabulary instruction, and you see that the program's not matching up, then you can talk to administration. You can even just make tweaks on your own because you know so clearly, hey, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I see that maybe this program is or isn't following it, and I'm going to act accordingly to make sure that my kids really get what they need, regardless of what might be going on in this program. So as I promised, I'm going to break down the key structured literacy components. You might see these kind of grouped differently, but this is the way that makes the most sense to me. And these are all things that you want to plan for in your literacy block schedule. Okay, so number one is oral language. So kids using language orally, talking, right? Using everyday language, but also academic vocabulary. This is something where I might have a tiny bit of time scheduled specifically for it, but what I actually do is I make time for oral language intentionally, and I plan for it throughout my entire literacy block. Okay, next up we have phonological awareness, and phonemic awareness is a very important skill set within phonological awareness. I have videos about this on my YouTube channel, so you can check those out, but this is an important component for K-2. Then we have phonics, right? And when I say phonics, that can include everything from just learning the letters, like in kindergarten, to being able to decode, read words using phonics knowledge, to encode, meaning spell words using phonics knowledge, all of that. Next up, we have high frequency words. Sometimes I include this under phonics or fluency, but just a knowledge of words that appear frequently in text, specifically how irregularly spelled words are read and also spelled, because those are tricky. Fluency, right? Fluency development. We have vocabulary. That includes morphology, language comprehension, so listening comprehension, especially for those littles that are just learning to read, and also then reading comprehension, which really just go hand in hand, but it kind of will look different how the kids are practicing it depending upon how old they are and their reading abilities. And then of course we have writing, so grammar, sentence construction, and just the content of what kids are writing. So all of these things you want to make sure to include in your science of reading based schedule. All right, so that was the foundation, right? That solid understanding of the science of reading. And again, I have that course available for you in the caption of this video that you can check out to learn more and get that deep understanding. But next, I want to move up to the second part of that little house image. And what I had there in the second part was my skills first scheduling method. So many times teachers are, and I know I've definitely done this myself in the past, they're making their schedule based on like activities like reading or read aloud or small group or, this program or this activity. And what ends up happening is that you don't have time for all of it. And you can end up overdoing some skills and underdoing or omitting other skills. So that's why what I really recommend is making your schedule based upon skills, not based upon activities. So as you can see here, and this is just a screenshot from the full schedules that I give in my course, but instead of like read aloud here, it's listed as reading comprehension lesson. I can make it a read aloud, or I can use a tool from like a curriculum resource that I have, but I don't list that first. I know that this part of my day is focused on reading comprehension. If we go up here, you'll see reading skill lesson. And this particular type of activity actually covers different skills throughout the week. So what I have listed here are print concepts, decoding, sentence and paragraph level comprehension, super important, fluency, vocabulary, and oral language. So I am scheduling based upon skill. And then what I do is I fill in, to teach reading comprehension, I'm going to do this interactive read aloud, or I'm going to do, this type of activity, but I'm starting with the skills always. And so when you do this, you feel confident knowing that you are covering all essential skills. What can happen, and I mentioned this with the whole small group situation, is that sometimes you feel like, oh my gosh, I have to fit all of this into this particular activity or this small group, when in reality, you are covering it during other parts of your literacy block. So when you start with skills, and you're done with your making your schedule, then you can say, I know that we're covering this stuff. So if I don't have time for it in small group, or I don't get to it like one day, I know how else it's addressed. So it just like lends itself to like you feeling more relaxed and in control because you know that you're covering what's most important. All right, so the roof of this whole little reading house was weekly scheduling for explicit instruction. I made that the roof intentionally because if you don't use explicit instruction, everything you're teaching will like fly out of the quote unquote reading house as if it had no roof. So explicit instruction is key in the science of reading and structured literacy. There's different components of it, and I go more in depth in my course, but some important things are just breaking down skills into manageable pieces, modeling, and then this other part is gradual release of responsibility so that you support kids in learning XYZ skill at first, and then you gradually remove support as time goes on. And I find that it's really, really helpful if you plan for this intentionally when you make your schedule. Sometimes in one single lesson, you might model, have the kids practice with support, and then have them independently practice on their own. But in K-2, often kids just need a little bit more help. And so you might want to devote, with particular skills, not every skill, but with some skills, you might want to devote an entire day to like the modeling portion. And then across the week, you're gradually removing support until they're practicing on their own. So this is why it's so helpful to schedule by the week, not just have the same schedule every single day. Okay, so like what I grabbed here is one of the schedules that you get when you join my course. But so this is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I cut that off at the top, but this is for reading comprehension. And let's say you're teaching a skill like, asking questions while you're reading to try to clarify what the author means. So basically, in kid language, like when you're confused or you want to know more about what the author is saying, ask a question. This is a strategy that's been shown to improve reading comprehension. So anyway, on Monday, you're modeling this. You take a book or part of a text, maybe it's nonfiction, and you model. You are asking questions and thinking aloud. And then on Tuesday, you say, hey, we're going to, practice this strategy again of asking questions and thinking aloud, or of asking questions, of the author to try to clarify, blah, blah, blah. And then this time you have the kids help you. So maybe you stop as you're reading, and maybe you're still doing a little bit of modeling, but this time then you're saying, do you have any questions? Or which part of this is confusing to you? Or which part do you want to know more about? Right? So you're still leading, but the kids are assisting you. And then, whoops, that was actually supposed to be circled with Wednesday. So we skipped ahead a little bit here, but let's look at Wednesday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, where it says you assist students. So by Wednesday now, the kids are getting a little better at this. And by this point, you can say, you know what, as we're reading this book, I want you to raise your hand if you have a question, and then I'll write it on, this chart paper or whatever. But you're encouraging the kids to take the lead, and you are helping them rather than them helping you. And then last but not least, what you saw me accidentally circle first was this apply. So by Thursday, maybe by Friday, they are actually, whether it's a book that you read aloud or a text they're reading on their own, they are actually applying the strategy, maybe with a partner, maybe totally independently, because you've gradually removed support and done it over multiple days. So when you plan for this ahead of time, it is so much easier to implement the explicit instruction that's so important in the science of reading, and not just have your schedule be the same every day. Sometimes this gradual release needs to happen over the course of a week, depending on the skill. All right, so I know that was a lot of information, but I hope that this is helpful. With all of this in place, you can make a schedule that's successful for the kids and you. But again, we got to have that clear understanding of all parts of the science of reading. We need to schedule based upon skills, not based upon activities. And then when you make your weekly schedule, we want to think about how we're going to gradually release responsibility to kids over the course of a week. So again, with all of this in place, you will feel so much better about your schedule, and it will be so much better instructionally for your students as well. Thanks so much for watching. I hope that this was helpful. Don't forget, I have that full course on how to implement the science of reading in K-2, as well as more detailed schedules and just a whole lot more support than I was able to provide in this short video. So look for the link to that course in the caption for this video. Again, thanks for watching. I hope that this helped you. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.